First, if you haven't already, please silence your phones. Second, we would ask that you hold questions until the end of the talk. You'll see there's a bunch of mics on the table in front of you. They are currently muted, but when we have wrapped up the main presentation, we will unmute those mics so that people who get called on can be heard in the room. Third, we want to give a big shout out to our Emerald level business sponsor for tonight's event, the Brad Capel team at Sotheby's International Realty. And a fun fact, in addition to supporting SRA through the business, Brad and his wife Barb are also personal supporters of ours. So if any of you are giving to SRA personally or through your business, there's no prohibition on doing both. I just wanted to let you all know that. Last but not least, I wanted to report on a few quick things from Seven River Association. First, we're about halfway done with a stormwater management project that we've been managing up in Annapolis along Bay Ridge Road at the Giant Shopping Center there to help keep Back Creek cleaner. And tomorrow, we're going to begin mobilization on a living shoreline project in the West Annapolis neighborhood of Wardour. And lastly, in case anybody's wondering why I'm dressed up so formally, I came straight here from the General Assembly in downtown where I was testifying on the fourth piece of legislation that SRA has weighed in on this session. So far, we've been testifying for legislation to protect green space and limit upzoning of our properties, to preserve vernal pool habitat in the watershed, to reduce plastic pollution. We got a bottle deposit bill coming down the pipe, guys, so this is going to be great. We'll join the 10 other states, none of whom have gone back on implementing a bottle deposit bill, by the way. And tonight to make sure that we still have level government funding for stream restoration projects. So with all that, thank you again for coming out tonight, and although he may not need any introduction, I'm going to hand it off to Brian Gomes, our SRA board member, environmental educator extraordinaire, to introduce tonight's speaker.
Jesse. Good evening, folks. Thanks for coming out tonight. Give a round of applause for the suit and the mic. So again, my name is Brian Gomes, with the board here for Seven River Association. I just wore a jacket because we're in a new space, and I felt like it was exciting to be in a new big space, and we love the turnout. So thanks you all for coming out this evening. Raise your hand if you own this book. A few of you. You are among a few of 14,000 people that own this book. He said it's running low, so if you haven't gotten your copy, you should get it while it's still available. Jay Fleming began his love of photography at the age of 13 when he received his first camera. Whether he is taking pictures of dramatic sunrises over the water or fishermen hauling in their gear, the passion in his craft and visual storytelling is obvious in every photograph. Jay's talent is undeniable, and his photography is not only beautiful, but purposeful. And we're going to learn all about that tonight as he dives into the economics and ecology of blue catfish in the Chesapeake Bay. And one last plug, keep your wallets open in 2028. There will be a new book coming out called Atlantic Harvest that Jay will be premiering. So keep that on the back burner. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jay Fleming.
Thank you. I feel a little bit underdressed when that everybody's in suits but the presenter, but that's okay. I'm just a meager catfisherman. So obviously I'm a photographer first, but catfishing and the Chesapeake Bay has become sort of a passion for me. I grew up here in Annapolis, and I grew up on the water fishing. I was very involved with some of the activity at DNR at a very young age. My mom, who's in the crowd, she got me involved with some surveying stuff with DNR. I ended up getting an internship at Maryland DNR and doing shad and sturgeon restoration, and then doing a couple other jobs in fisheries. So before I wanted to be a photographer, I wanted to be a fisheries biologist, but principles of biology at St. Mary's College quickly weeded me out of that. So I pursued an economics degree, which ended up working out a little better for me because I was able to kind of pursue my other passion for photography. And that really took off after college, and I was able to combine the two passions, and now I can use the photography as a storytelling tool to educate people on issues like the catfish in the Chesapeake Bay. So tonight I'm going to be talking about the invasive blue catfish that are here in the Chesapeake Bay. They've been here for about 50 years, but they've really become a problem more in our region as opposed to just in the regions where they were initially introduced. So they've kind of spread throughout the bay. And I'm going to go over the different implications of why they're causing harm in the bay, and also what we can do to kind of play a role in suppressing their populations and support different programs that are initiated on a federal and state level to combat the blue catfish. So there is a little bit of hope, but it is a pretty rough situation with the blue catfish currently. So to start off, not all species of catfish in the Chesapeake Bay are non-native or invasive. We have 3 species of native catfish in the Chesapeake Bay. There's the white catfish, the yellow bullhead, and the brown bullhead. The white catfish is the top catfish on the slide. Then we have the blue catfish, which is invasive. Then we have the channel catfish, which is considered non-native. So the channel catfish was introduced into the Chesapeake Bay in, I think, the late 1800s. It's been here for quite a while. And the reason they're not considered invasive is because they don't really harm the native ecosystem. They haven't exploded in populations like the blue catfish have. So there's a major difference between invasive and non-native species. So I guess first, in order to be an invasive species, the species has to be non-native. It has to be introduced here from another watershed, another system. So non-native species, it's a species that was introduced that does not cause harm to the environment or other native species. Some examples of this that we have in Chesapeake Bay are the Chinese mitten crab. Has anybody ever heard of the mitten crab? It was a species that came in through the ballast water of ships. There was a big alarm over these probably 20 or 30 years ago, but the mitten crab's never really taken off. They haven't really successfully reproduced and exploded in populations like some of these other species. The channel catfish, which I already mentioned, species like crappie or carp. Carp have been here for years, but they really don't cause the harm that some of these other invasive species do. So an invasive species is considered a species that was introduced, so it's a non-native species that causes harm to native species and the ecosystem. So with invasive species, we see a lot of rapid population growth. The invasive species outcompete other native species. They prey upon native species, and by doing all that, they disrupt the food chain. So examples of that are obviously the blue catfish, flathead catfish, northern snakehead, and even largemouth bass. Some people would argue that largemouth bass aren't invasive, but they do prey upon fish that we have like shad, perch, other stuff like that. So there are a lot of invasive species in the Chesapeake Bay, but currently the one that we're most concerned with is the blue catfish. Previously, a lot of people were very concerned about snakehead. Snakehead even made it into Hollywood. There was a film about snakehead attacking people, but snakehead, they don't have the tolerance of different salinities and different habitats like the blue catfish do, so they can't really colonize different areas of the bay like the blue catfish have. They're very limited to freshwater environments, whereas blue catfish can tolerate a lot of different salinities, probably up to about 10 to 15 parts per thousand. So that's allowed them to rapidly expand their range throughout the Chesapeake Bay. This is a photograph of blue catfish that I took in the Potomac River, and has become a pretty widely used image for different publications with USGS, Maryland DNR, and different federal organizations to kind of raise awareness for the blue catfish. So this is how the photography and all this couples together. And actually, these are invasive snails too in this photograph. So there's a lot, and that just happened by accident. There's a lot of invasive species in different regions. We even have goldfish in areas like the Potomac River and the upper Chesapeake Bay that people would probably release from their fish tanks when they got too big or flushed them down the toilet, and somehow they made it into the river. Don't ask how. They made it out of the sewage treatment plant. So the blue catfish are apex predators. They get fairly large. The largest blue catfish caught, which is the IGFA all-tackle world record, was 143 pounds. It was caught in Bugs Island, Virginia. So that's a lake, like a closed system in Virginia, right on the border of North Carolina. But regularly people catch hook and line, boat fish, and commercial fishermen catfish up to 70, 80 pounds. The catfish on the right that you see was the boat fishing state record in Maryland that was caught, I think about 2 years ago, 72 pounds. So that's quite a big fish. And the good news about these big fish is that they're a lot of fun to catch. So there are people out there going after them and hopefully removing them from the ecosystem. But there is a contingent of people who like to catch and release these fish. I call them sport catters, but they like to go after these trophy catfish. And that's where the conservation efforts kind of butt heads with the sport fishing interests. So there's politics even in catfish, if you can believe that. But what's really concerning are not just these big fish, but all these little fish that are in the Chesapeake Bay that don't really have any economic value, don't really have any recreational value. It's these catfish that are like the size of a cigarette or up to 1 pound. There's probably millions and millions of them in the Chesapeake Bay. It's estimated through some different studies that there are about 700 million pounds of blue catfish biomass in the Chesapeake Bay. It's quite a few fish. And I guess I forgot to mention this at first, but blue catfish initially came from the Mississippi River drainage. So they're a good fish, but they're in the wrong place. And how do they get here? Blue catfish were introduced into the Chesapeake watershed by the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources in the 70s and 80s. The idea was to establish a new sport fishing opportunity. This was done at a time when striped bass stocks were declining. I don't know if anybody remembers the moratorium for striped bass before I was born, but striped bass fishing was basically shut down on the East Coast because stocks were so low. And the response of the government at the time was to introduce a species that they didn't know was going to have this much ecological harm. So this was done at a time when little thought was given to the potential impacts to the ecosystem or the fact that they would actually spread. So the initial stocking sites were in the James River in Virginia, the York River, the Rappahannock, and the Potomac Rivers. Flathead catfish were also introduced. So flathead catfish are an issue in certain areas, but just like the snakehead, they're a little bit limited in terms of the habitats that they can get into. So they're a lot less adaptable than the blue catfish. You'll catch flathead catfish, but you have to go like up into the Susquehanna or up into the Potomac River where there's actually flowing water. So they don't really inhabit tidal waters. And this problem I found through a lot of research and talking to people in different areas is not just unique to the Chesapeake. Blue catfish were also introduced into different river systems in North Carolina. So this is a problem in North Carolina, in like Roanoke River, Albemarle Sound, Pamlico Sound, those areas. So this is not unique to the Chesapeake Bay. There were apparently a lot of people around in the 70s and 80s who really wanted catfish. So prior to me becoming a full-time photographer and doing this kind of stuff here at home, I actually had a job in Yellowstone National Park where I worked for the Department of the Interior, operating a boat on Yellowstone Lake where we were gill netting for lake trout. You wouldn't think that really Yellowstone and gill netting would go in the same sentence, but we were actually catching an invasive species, the lake trout, which was doing similar harm to the ecosystem that these blue catfish are doing. So the lake trout were introduced, again, by the government as a sport fishing opportunity, and we were kind of trying to clean up the mess and suppress these populations of lake trout. So it actually worked out pretty well. The Department of the Interior took it very seriously because it was Yellowstone National Park, which is kind of a symbol of the environment in this country, and also because it was a closed system. So it was a lot easier to manage that kind of invasive species in that closed body of water. Whereas in Chesapeake Bay, we've got so much water and so much shoreline that it's a lot harder to actually control the spread of the blue catfish. So the last year that I was in Yellowstone, we caught 330,000 lake trout gill netting. So I really don't think that'd be hard to do in Chesapeake Bay, but 330,000 would barely put a dent in the blue catfish. It's estimated that of the 700 million pound biomass, we would need to remove 15 million pounds in order to start putting a dent in the population of blue catfish. So that's a lot of fish. That's a lot of effort that would be required on both the commercial and the recreational sides. So as I mentioned before, the blue catfish were initially introduced into these rivers that you see here in the southern portion of the bay. So the James River is really the epicenter of the whole problem. The York River, the Rappahannock, and the Potomac rivers. But how did they spread throughout the bay? What people are theorizing is that they spread throughout the bay when we had these big rainfall events and when there was a lot of runoff pushing the salinity line of the Chesapeake Bay down the bay, and the blue catfish were able to come out of these rivers and go up into the bay and to other areas where they weren't yet, like their populations weren't yet inhabited. Probably in search of food, probably trying to thin out their population and eliminate competition for food. So most recently, we had a lot of rain in the summer of 2018 and that fall, and that's when people think that the blue catfish really came up into the upper portion of Chesapeake Bay, the mid bay. So right now, we're currently seeing a lot of larger blue catfish, like Susquehanna Flats area. Even around here in the Severn River, we've been seeing some, and I've been catching them. I got my commercial fishing license. I got a $15 license from DNR to target blue and flathead catfish. So I've been going north of the Bay Bridge and targeting catfish with a lot of success. I mean, it's not bad when a photographer can go out and catch 1,000 pounds. That means there's a lot of fish.
In a day?
In about 4 hours. Yeah. So the license that I have for the blue catfish is a finfish trot line license. So that allows me to fish a trot line like you would for crabs, but just baited with, hooks, and we usually use shad for bait, gizzard shad. So I fish about, I would say 100 hooks per line and about 4 lines. So it's a lot of work for 50 cents a pound. I won't quit my day job. I always tell people when I'm catfishing, I'm actually losing money. So this is a video of Conowingo Dam, if I can get it to play. Anyway, I went up to Conowingo Dam in 2018 after we had all that rain to document the river kind of surging and the runoff coming out of the dam. And this is the event that we think precipitated the spread of blue catfish up into this portion of Chesapeake Bay. So this could very well align with the low recruitment of striped bass that we're seeing in the Young of the Year Index. That's something that really hasn't been researched fully, but there's a lot of blue catfish of a variety of different sizes in the upper Chesapeake Bay, which is the most important spawning ground for striped bass on the entire East Coast. So people think that these blue catfish could be eating striped bass eggs, like the smaller ones, like the ones the size of a cigarette, could be just sitting on the spawning grounds of the striped bass eating eggs before they even have a chance to hatch. The larger catfish could be eating the juveniles throughout their kind of life cycle in Chesapeake Bay. It's an issue that could affect a lot of people and a lot of businesses, because striped bass are a very important and iconic fish to Maryland. These are 2 blue catfish that I caught during the COVID pandemic. This is kind of really when I started targeting catfish, but these were caught right in the Severn River. And I grew up on the river, lived in Epping Forest as a young kid, then moved across the river. And I've kind of fished on this river my whole life and spent a lot of time on it. And prior to this, I had never seen blue catfish in the Severn River. So as you can tell, these are pretty large fish, and I really feel like they spread during that rainfall event in 2018, but who knows? So the blue catfish in the bay and also in the river threaten a lot of our native species. So blue catfish are not picky eaters; they're very opportunistic. So they could eat things like the crabs, which are obviously important commercial species and recreational species in this region. The juvenile striped bass that you see on the left, white perch on the top left, and chain pickerel. So these are all native species whose populations are potentially struggling, and blue catfish are only putting added pressure on this. So these species are having issues with water quality, predation. It's really an uphill battle for all these native species in the bay when it comes down to surviving and reproducing. So the blue catfish diet. Blue catfish, unlike other catfish species, they feed throughout the water column. They feed in the bottom on shellfish. They feed on crustaceans on the bottom like crabs. They feed on fish. So they're really feeding from the bottom all the way to the top of the water. So they're very opportunistic. Their diet really depends on the size of the fish and water temperature. They eat fish eggs. They even eat aquatic vegetation certain times of the year. But the larger fish predominantly feed on other fish and shellfish. So this is a fish that I caught long lining off the mouth of the Magothy River. And one way for me to get all these samples to collect them was to actually go catch them. So that's what really got me motivated to get this blue catfish trot line license, was I wanted to take pictures of all the stomach contents. So there was actually easier ways than catching them to do this. I actually ended up going to Reliant Seafood and a couple other seafood processors and just took the carcasses of the fish that they were filleting and cut into the fish to collect what was in the stomachs. I have a very sensitive sense of smell, so I used a lot of Vicks vapor rub under my head to make it possible to get all these pictures. So fortunately, they're not scratch and sniff, but I'm going to show you some of the stomach contents that I collected throughout this whole little experiment that I was doing. It's kind of funny too, because a lot of people from USGS actually saw what I was doing and actually went in and did some sampling of their own after I did that. So this was a fish that we caught off of Sandy Point in the main stem of the Chesapeake Bay. This was right north of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. So as you can see, this fish was eating a wide variety of different things. We found a chicken bone in the fish. I'm guessing somebody might have thrown a chicken bone out their window when they were driving over the bridge. Maybe the catfish picked it up. But we found menhaden. We found a lot of other fish that were kind of unidentifiable. We found pieces of blue crabs. We found soft-shell clams. And then we found these Macoma clams, which is another species of shellfish that we have in the bay. But you can tell that this fish was feeding on everything from what was in the bottom to what was in the top of the water column, because menhaden kind of inhabit the middle to the top of the water column. So very opportunistic predators. This was a sample from a larger fish that was caught in the Chester River. This was a fish that was processed at Tillman Island Seafood on the Eastern Shore. So I went to a variety of places to collect fish from different areas. Basically what I saw was that anything that was in the stomachs of these fish was essentially a sampling of what was in the river or body of water where it came from. So this fish had some pretty large other fish in it. It had white perch, gizzard shad. Gizzard shad are really the preferred food for these catfish, especially in the Potomac and other regions where they're very prevalent. A lot of blue crab parts. I know people are very concerned about how many blue crabs these catfish are eating, because obviously Maryland is the state for crabs, and we wouldn't want anything to threaten that. Soft-shell clams, menhaden, and again, the Macoma clams. These are some samples of fish that were caught in the Potomac River. Again, gizzard shad, very prevalent bait fish in the Chesapeake Bay. We had these different species of clams, the Macoma clam and the Rangia clam, and then the mud crabs, crawfish parts, and then some miscellaneous fish parts. But as you can tell, these catfish are really eating anything. I've seen pictures online of catfish that have actually eaten wood ducks and turtles. There's a scientist, Noah Bresnahan, on the Eastern Shore. He's a professor at Salisbury. He actually collected some samples of a fish that ate a wood duck on the Nanticoke River. And they'll eat turtles, they'll eat anything. So they get very big and they're very opportunistic. So the impact on native species is pretty obvious. With few natural predators and a voracious appetite, these fish definitely pose a significant threat to populations of native species, and that threat to native species could disrupt the food web of the Chesapeake Bay. So a lot of the fish that are, the crabs that are very important for us, are potentially at risk. So in the James River, it's estimated that blue catfish take up 75% of the biomass. So that's 3 out of every 4 pounds of fish is a blue catfish in the James River. And the James is really the like ground zero for the blue catfish. That's where they were first introduced. And that's where you still see a lot of efforts to preserve the trophy catfish. That's where there's a lot of charter fishing guides and people who really target those larger catfish. In the Potomac, that number is a little bit less. It's estimated to be about 70%. But the growth of the population since the introduction in the 70s has been pretty amazing. So the blue catfish are very adaptable, very hardy, and if they can live in the Potomac right now, let's face it, they can live anywhere. But the problem is that we really don't want to see the upper Chesapeake Bay turn into just blue catfish. So that's what I'm fearful for, and that's why I'm kind of trying to educate people, is I don't want to see the bay that I grew up in catching sea trout, flounder, bluefish north of the Bay Bridge. I don't want to see that just become blue catfish. To me, that's kind of sad because I know what it was and what it could be. It'd be very unfortunate to see that happen in the future. So there is some good news about the blue catfish. It's estimated that there are close to 1 billion pounds of catfish in the bay. So that's a huge opportunity for commercial fishing to come in and for people to make money off this fishery. So when other fisheries are kind of struggling in the bay, like striped bass, crabs, and even oysters with the market right now, there's potential for people to make money and shift gears from these traditional fisheries into something new that's kind of emerging. And that's what we've seen with the fishery for blue catfish. And this is a graph that shows the growth in the landings of the blue catfish between 2012 and 2023. And there have been efforts on both the state and the federal level to kind of develop these fisheries in the Potomac, Maryland, and Virginia, and to kind of eliminate some of the barriers to entry for processing and commercial fishing. For example, with the license that I have, to encourage people to go and target them. So I'm going to go over some of the different gear types that people use to harvest blue catfish. This is the finfish trot line license, and basically this is just like a trot line for crabs. It's a very simple way to target blue catfish. Anybody in this room could go get a $15 license and become a commercial fisherman. And you ride around in your truck with your commercial license number on your truck, and it's a lot of fun, to be honest with you. It's very fun to go set a trot line, let it sit overnight, and pull it in by hand. We've caught fish up to 54 pounds right by the Bay Bridge. So never in my life would I have thought that I could catch catfish like that right in my backyard. But you have to make the most of what you have, and I'm trying to take people out and educate them and show them that we can make something out of this resource. There are a lot of opportunities for selling these fish, for eating them, and for also using them as recreation. Another gear type, which is pretty prevalent in Maryland and also some parts of Virginia, is fish potting. And these are basically like large collapsible hoop nets that watermen use. You kind of have to have a more advanced rig than mine. You can't just go out with some high school kids and pull in a line. You have to have like hydraulic pullers and a lot of investment, but this is what the full-time watermen are doing in the state to catch fish in the tributaries. So like the Choptank, the Nanticoke, Sassafras, the Upper Bay, Pocomoke River, there are a lot of people that are using fish pots. And basically they just bait the pot with clams, other types of fish like shad and that stuff, and the catfish will swim in and they'll get trapped by a series of funnels, and then they'll get stuck in there where the watermen can pull them out. Hull seining is primarily done in the Potomac River and the upper Chesapeake Bay, and hull seining accounts for the majority of the harvest in Maryland and the Potomac, and also Virginia. It's a very effective method. Hull seines can be up to 900 yards long, and basically the watermen set a hull seine in like a horseshoe shape around point of shoreline, and then pull the hull seine in by hand once they get to the shore. So the idea is to kind of encircle a school of fish and bring them in and and kind of trap them and then fish them out. I've gone out shooting pictures from my book, Work in the Water, and just on different occasions with watermen on Port Tobacco River down in Charles County. And I've seen people bring in hauls of like 100,000 pounds of catfish. Pretty amazing. So this is really the time of year when watermen are haul seining because the catfish are schooled up. They're preparing to go spawn, and they're schooled up and they're aggregated, so it's easier for them to target catfish this particular time of year. So electrofishing is kind of a newer, more experimental gear type in Maryland, but in Virginia, there's actually a few permits for commercial fishermen to shock catfish and harvest them by using this electrical current. So it's a pretty neat way of fishing. It's usually done for sampling purposes in Maryland. So there's a couple groups at DNR that do this for sampling, but basically they send an electrical current through the water, through these probes that you see on the boat, and the fish get shocked and come up to the surface, and then you would dip them out with the net. So it's pretty fun. You get to see, I used to do this at DNR, you get to see everything that's in the water. But you know, there's development of this to become an active like commercial gear type where people can target blue catfish. You're probably wondering what happens to the other fish that gets shocked. It's a great question. The other fish that get shocked, like the unwanted bycatch, would just swim off. I guess they're fine. They wouldn't tell us otherwise. But this seems to be a very effective way to target a specific size fish and also not harm bycatch in terms of like gill netting or other methods of harvest.
They're no longer depressed.
Yeah, they get shocked and you wake them up.
No longer depressed.
So gill netting is an effective way to target catfish too, but if you've ever been gill netting, you would know that catfish have spines on either side of them, and they're a mess to pick out of a net. But it's an effective way to target catfish. You can target a specific size fish with a gill net based upon the mesh size that you're using. So this is something that people do again in the winter and spring when the catfish are kind of aggregated before they spawn. So the processing industry for blue catfish is growing. There are currently 6 processors that are licensed in the state to cut catfish. There's been some legislation, I think back in 2008, there was a law that was passed on a federal level, implemented by the USDA, that required a inspector to be on site when catfish were being processed. This was a law that was proposed by some folks down in the South where catfish farming and aquaculture is very prevalent. The idea of the law was to protect the aquaculture industry where people have a lot of money invested in the catfish farms. So it's kind of stifled the growth of the processing industry in the Chesapeake Bay, but people have gotten these inspectors on site and now they're able to sell their product and have it inspected. So it's an added expense, it's an added headache, but for the people who actually have it, it's actually a good thing because it opens more doors for them to get into different markets like Whole Foods, Wegmans. Some of these bigger chains kind of require that certification and inspection. So this is at Tillman Island Seafood on the Eastern Shore, one of the 6 processing facilities in the state. This is a photograph taken at Reliance Seafood. Reliance in Jessup. Jessup, Maryland is basically the hub of seafood for the metropolitan DC region. There are currently, I think, 3 processors that are cutting blue catfish in Jessup. But Reliant is probably the biggest of any in the state. And during the peak of the catfish season, which is right about now, they're cutting probably around 100,000 pounds of catfish a week. So it's an incredible resource, providing a lot of jobs for people, not only the watermen, but the fish cutters, the truck drivers, people in restaurants, and all that. So it's, there is some silver lining to the catfish. As I mentioned, some of the growing pains with the USDA inspection. Also in Virginia, there's currently regulation that prohibits the harvest of larger blue catfish over 32 inches. This is where I said that the sport fishing interests are colliding with the conservation interests. So in Virginia, larger blue catfish are protected. In Maryland, currently there are certain areas that are closed to all commercial fishing, like in the Severn River, believe it or not. There's really you can't set gear in the Severn River to target fish like blue catfish. You can't set hoop nets, you can't set gill nets, you can't set long lines, Magothy River as well. So hopefully that's something that will change in the future, because we don't want to create these blue catfish sanctuaries. And also, one thing with the finfish trot line license that I have that pertains to me is that you can't fish your finfish trot line license south of Bay Bridge. So even if there were catfish south of the Bay Bridge, I couldn't go target them. So laws are slow to change, but blue catfish populations continue to expand. So hopefully there's a little more fire to change some of these rules, to change some of these laws, so that we can continue to expand on this, get people excited about targeting them. So reduce those barriers to entry and make it more profitable for commercial fishermen to go after them. So blue catfish, malicious but delicious. That's my tagline. Blue catfish have a very mild flavor. It's a white flaky meat, and they're relatively inexpensive compared to other seafoods. If you go to Whole Foods or Wegmans and look at the seafood case, you'll see blue catfish fillets for $9 a pound, $10 a pound. Striped bass will be $25 a pound. So it's a big price difference. And if we can just get people to get past this misconception that catfish have a muddy kind of flavor from feeding on the bottom, then we can hopefully encourage more people to eat it and try it. I work with a lot of chefs, and one of my favorite chefs to work with is Chef Matt Lego from Leo in Annapolis. It's a restaurant on West Street. Matt's a great ambassador for invasive species on the Chesapeake Bay. He switched on his menu, he was carrying rockfish. He switched to carrying catfish because of the seasonal closures of rockfish. And he wanted to keep something on his menu that was consistent and also more affordable for the average consumer. So he didn't want to have a $50 seafood dish on his menu. He wanted to have a $25 seafood dish that people could try and, also make an impact with, and making the bay a better place by eating more catfish. So Matt's been a great ambassador. He participates with me in a lot of different publicity events. We were on Maryland Public Television. If you look up Maryland Farm and Harvest, you can see what it's like to fish a trot line. I actually made Matt pull it in. He was on the boat with me. That's what's nice about bringing people on the boat, is I can put them to work. All I have to do is run the boat, and I make them pull the line in. But Matt came out, and he had a great time. And getting chefs like Matt involved, it's a great way to get them to encourage their customers to eat it. And these chefs really have the buying power to purchase more seafood than the average consumer. So for example, any of us, if we probably go to the grocery store and buy seafood maybe once a month, twice a month, but Matt and other restaurant people are buying seafood every week. And they're not just buying a pound, they're buying hundreds of pounds. So if we can turn the chefs and the people who have the influence in the food market onto catfish, and that's how we can really move the needle and get more fish out of the water and help the market overall. So one of the other people who I like to work with is Nick Hargrove. Nick is really a catfish champion, and he's one of the younger people that's in the seafood industry. He has a fish cutting house on the Eastern Shore, Tillman Island Seafoods, and he's really trying a lot of very cool experimental things with these catfish. He's selling catfish to some school systems on the Eastern Shore. He's selling catfish overseas to armed forces in Kuwait, I think. He's selling it all over the world. So he's really trying to expand the market and trying to figure out a way to make money off the resource that we have that we need to get out of the water. Community engagement is a very important thing that I've been involved with. I've been, like I said, trot lining for the past couple of years, and I've actually been using high school kids who are looking to get service hours as free labor on my boat. And not only is it a great way for me to get people who are excited about it. I mean, these kids have the time, they've got the energy, they want to get out, and they love to fish. And they've been able to actually use this as community service and use it to not only fulfill these hours that they need, but also tell their friends about it and post stuff on social media, get excited about it. So that's been a lot of fun. And also, like I mentioned, I've been taking people like Matt out and chefs out. I've been taking other restaurant people out and sharing that experience with them and allowing them to pull the trot line, take pictures and post on social media, and then take the fish back to their restaurants and actually serve them to their customers. We took a really high-end chef out from Washington, D.C., Jeremiah Langhorne, who runs the restaurant The Dabney. And Jeremiah, he has a Michelin star restaurant. He won a James Beard Award, but he's actually serving catfish, which kind of seems contradictory, but he's turned this catfish into a relatively high-end product that, you know, has some clout behind it, and he's kind of turning the tide with some of that. Another thing you can do is go fishing. Catfish, you know, like I said, they're incredibly abundant. They're fun to catch. It's a great resource. The picture on the right that you see is Shelby and I, and that's the 54-pound catfish that we caught at the Bay Bridge, just north of the Bay Bridge, in case you were wondering. Like I mentioned, you can't go south of the bridge. And the other picture is me with the snakehead that I caught bow fishing, another fun thing. There's an outfit that does bow fishing charters. If you've never been bow fishing, it's a lot of fun. You go at night and you illuminate the water, and the fish are kind of dormant, and you're able to shoot them with a bow and arrow. So that's a really fun way for people to catch these fish, go out and experience it and actually make a difference. So it's actually been studied by DNR and some other agencies that the bow fishermen are having the largest impact on the snakehead populations. I think that was just released by the department. But these bow fishermen also go after the catfish as well. And what you can do as a consumer is you can come out and support the catfish cook-off that I'm hosting with the Annapolis Maritime Museum. It's going to be the weekend after Mother's Day. We just rescheduled it because we didn't want it to interfere with Mother's Day. And we're going to be bringing in chefs from all over the region, including Jeremiah Langhorne, including Matt Lego, who are catfish champions, and they're going to be competing for the best invasive catfish dish, and they get bragging rights. So that's a fun thing that you can participate in if you'd like, and learn all about catfish. We bring in people from Maryland DNR, we bring in commercial watermen, and it's just a very fun, informative day for people to come out and learn about this issue in the Chesapeake Bay. So that's what I've got for you tonight on catfish.
I'm just going to unmute. We're new to this room, so there's going to be some high-tech action happening at your tables that you'll push this button.
Hold the white button down.
And it'll light up, and we'll say, Senator from Wisconsin. Speaking of, Jay's not a politician, so I'm going to preemptively ask you to keep the politically charged questions on the down low, okay? Let's ask questions related to.
That would make things interesting.
Yeah, okay?
But catfish are a bipartisan issue, so we can all agree, Republican or Democrat, that we want more catfish out of the water.
South of the bridge, I think what
you're
DNR
not-
is concerned about is bycatch
Yeah.
with striped bass.
Let's test it out.
And striped bass north of the bridge,
Only
especially
catching two catfish above
So,
the Bay Bridge.
Can you talk a little bit more about the biology, like the origin, like are they sexually mature in a year or two? Do they live forever? Like why is
Well,
this?
that restriction is basically, it prevents you from setting here,
And I think
the
the
trot
catfish,
line, specifically the trot
in
line,
terms of the
south
growth
of
rates,
Chesapeake
I
Bay.
think some of these blue catfish that
So
we're
I
seeing,
really don't
like that
understand the
50
logic
pounder
of that
and some of these
at all,
larger
but
fish that are getting 70, 80 pounds, those fish
It
are
is what
probably
it is,
more
and
than
hopefully
30
it'll change.
years old. So they're not like, once they get up to 20 pounds, they probably grow pretty quickly, but after that, their growth rates probably slow down. So I don't know if anybody,
Yeah, actually, the blue cats start off very slow. Takes them about 7 years to get to 3 pounds.
oh wow,
During that period, they're eating anything,
yeah.
and that includes mud. They will digest the algae and worms and stuff in mud. It would include the clams, which I've seen on the other type of photography, X-rays. From here to butt, nothing but clamshells.
Yeah, they love the clams
It's
and shellfish.
unbelievable what they can do, and how quickly they grow after they go strictly on fish.
On fish.
After that
So that's when they
6-7 year
shoot
old
off.
time frame, 3 pounds, and that's when they take off.
And do you know when they sexually mature and when they start spawning?
I'm not sure, but I think it's still in that 8-10 year range, maybe.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, I was fishing last year, and you're probably familiar with Fletcher's Boathouse.
Oh, yeah, love it there.
So I work in DC every spring. I take some mornings and rent a rowboat, go out there and fish for shad. And last year I caught my first blue catfish accidentally while fishing for shad. And it wasn't a spectacularly big fish, but much bigger than what you're used to catching there. And since I was going straight to work, I threw it back, and I felt kind of bad. And when I went back into the returned the boat, and I said to the people at the boathouse there, I said, I kind of feel bad for throwing it back. I should have brought it back. They said, don't worry. The commercial guys are reporting that they're catching fewer of them now. I was wondering if that's overly optimistic, or you've heard the same thing on the Potomac.
I haven't heard the same thing on the Potomac, but I've heard the same thing in the upper Chesapeake Bay. 2 years ago, when really the majority of the effort up here first started, people were catching a lot of bigger fish, including us down at the Bay Bridge, but now there are fewer bigger fish. So that's the problem, is that, the bigger fish, people can make more money on the bigger fish because they weigh up quicker. But, people don't want to target the fish that are really ideal to eat, which are the, 3 to 5 pounders. So it's a lot harder for people to make money on those smaller fish. And you're targeting them a different way. You're not going to catch those smaller fish like hook and line. You're going to catch them in like a hoop net or a hull seine, something like that. So I have noticed that people are commenting on the commercial fishery changing for them in a short amount of time. But Fletcher's is a great spot. If you ever want to try to catch catfish on your own, you can take a kayak to Fletcher's Cove, or you can rent a rowboat. I caught a 62-pounder in my kayak there. It was pretty awesome. It pulled me like half a mile down the river.
It's like a slave.
That's a
Yeah.
long road back.
Potomac sleigh ride. Yes, sir.
Is there any way we can sick omega protein on the blue cats?
I mean, that would be ideal, wouldn't it? Because catfish do have a pretty high oil content in their meat. So I think there's probably potential that they could be processed for something like that for fish meal. There are some initiatives, including this new Laws Act, which is a bipartisan bill on a federal level that's looking into processing catfish for pet food. So encouraging the development of that industry. I kind of have mixed feelings about the pet food thing because I'm trying to get chefs turned on to them. Like Michelin star, James Beard chefs, and then, the legislators are like, let's make them into pet food, when, they're really better than just pet food. And if there are truly, people are reporting that, they're becoming harder to catch. If they are truly becoming harder to catch, why would we waste them on pet food? Sell them for as much as you possibly can.
So if the catfish eat everything, will they eat other catfish?
You would assume so. I would imagine. I mean, if they're taking up 75% of the biomass in the James River, they've got to be eating each other. I wouldn't doubt it. Any other questions?
So you were saying they came from the Mississippi River initially into the James. So are they native to the Mississippi and west, or?
They're native to the Mississippi River drainage,
Okay.
which is a huge watershed. But, in the Mississippi, like that goes all the way down to like Louisiana and the Delta there. They coexist with blue crabs in Louisiana. As we know, Maryland has a ton of blue crabs. So the catfish, they might not do as much harm to certain species as we might think. I think they're more harmful to fish than they are to crabs, personally. But again, I'm just a photographer. I just take pictures of stomach contents.
Jay?
We have quite a cadre of energetic young fishermen in our neighborhood. If we,
Awesome. I need some helpers for this spring.
and we want to encourage them. Well, if we were to recommend a bait, I mean, I'm thinking it's mostly bottom fishing for these folks. And
Yeah.
what do you want to put on the hook?
The best bait that I've found is gizzard shad. You can buy gizzard shad or menhaden. Menhaden works really well, but it just doesn't stay on the hook like a piece of gizzard shad does. Menhaden kind of gets mushy and falls apart. Gizzard shad is more firm meat, and that's what we really use to bait our trout lines with. It's gizzard shad.
Sport shop has, so, yeah.
Yeah, anglers.
For more than one, I'm kind of looking for more than one place to go that's,
Anglers would be the best spot to buy fresh bait around here. I get my bait from Wild Country Seafood in Eastport, because I sell them all my catfish, and they kind of give me bait, because I guess I'm selling it for under market value, but whatever. Like I said, I lose nothing.
Jay, awesome presentation. Thank you so much for all the education on the catfish. My question is 2026 going to be the year of the Catfish Ketchum Championship, where we, organize a big event to kind of raise some awareness and
We should.
something to
Absolutely.
complement the catfish cook-off?
Absolutely. I'm all for it.
Let's talk.
Are you saying you want to sign up?
Oh, I'll be your first.
All right.
I don't even know how to fish. Prepare to get bait in day one. You can use me as bait.
I would like to let people know there is currently an open invasive species on or coming open soon after the pickerel championship ends the end of the month, or just did, I guess. And but yes, CCA has catfish tournaments going on. It's a relatively low entry fee and prizes every month that you go and can win prizes every month. It's big and it runs all summer long, and it also includes snakeheads. But the main thing I wanted to bring up is I've been trying for years to go to supermarkets and see their catfish and say, what is it? And they say, it's blue catfish. Well, then you need to call it blue catfish because you've been selling mud catfish out of the South for decades.
Yeah.
And I won't touch that stuff.
Yeah.
And they won't put blue on the sign.
It needs to be.
Absolutely amazing. It's not a catfish. When you eat it compared to any other catfish, it's great.
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
Build it, we need to still build
Yeah,
it.
well, I did used to work in seafood marketing, so that's kind of another reason why I'm so into this. But yeah, proper labeling of seafood is a major problem, especially with crabs. Crab meat, crab cakes is a major issue, but yeah, I mean, the blue catfish needs to be advertised by the people selling it as wild caught Chesapeake Bay blue catfish, because there's definitely a big difference in the flavor between the wild caught catfish and then the farm raised catfish. It's a totally different product.
Thank you for being here today, Jay. To the gentleman that just spoke, I have noticed in our local market, both the grocery stores and restaurants, they are making a consolidated effort to advertise it as Chesapeake Bay wild caught blue catfish. That motivates me to buy it, seeing that on the shelves, and I have changed my purchasing habits because of that where I shop.
Awesome.
I've heard people speak about tournaments managed through local chapters and organizations that are interested in the conservancy of the fishery and things like that. There are states that do, through the DNR, large-scale tournament fishing, like commercial level removal of fish from those fisheries that are non-native fishes that are considered harmful to that environment. Is DNR looking at doing anything like that, or expanding their programs like what they have in Baltimore Harbor and Patapsco for bounties on invasive fish to be a wider spread effort to aid in the removal of these species from the bay?
I think so. I think there's a bounty program, not necessarily through DNR, but through some program in Baltimore, specifically targeting fish in the Patapsco River area. So hopefully we see more of that. I mean, it's all a matter of funding too. I mean, I'm sure DNR, if they had the funding, would love to put more of a bounty on these fish, but how much can they afford to just give out to people? I mean, I would love if I could get $25 a fish. That'd be awesome. I might quit photography.
Don't do that.
No, you're right, yeah.
So that bounty in the Patapsco and Baltimore Harbor, my understanding was it was run through DNR. It could have been wrong, but they offered $30 per fish, and they limited out, I think, to $3,500 a year for that bounty. I grew up in Oregon, so they target the pike minnow, and they have year-long competition. They do, I believe, by the weight for fish removed for recreational fishermen. Utah has a history of invasive carp species issues where they've done large-scale removals to the millions of tons of fish from the fishery in a single weekend using commercial fishery practices on a dedicated day sponsored by their natural resource officers to remove that. It'd be wonderful to see that grow and stay if they did have the funding, like you said. You
Absolutely.
spoke to the $15 trot line, and you spoke about processing houses that will take those fish. If I buy that $15 trot line, what additional credential do I need, or what other process or paperwork do I need to sign or fill out so I can take those fish to market?
So you don't need a dealer's permit if you're selling the fish to a registered like buying house. But if you want to sell the fish to a restaurant where they'll process them there, you have to have a dealer's permit. And I think that's an additional $50. So that's, but obviously you're going to make more money if you go directly to the restaurants and sell your fish there. But it's a challenge finding people who will take the fish. That's the main challenge for people who are just going kind of casually like me on the weekends, or not bringing in 1,000 pounds, 2,000 pounds of fish a day. It's hard to find somebody who will take fish on like an inconsistent basis.
If I'm selling those fish myself, am I allowed to process them and sell them as fillets, or I have to sell them as whole?
You have to sell them as whole fish. But the restaurant, like a smaller retail outfit, would be able to process them on their own. I think there are a few exemptions to that. But you personally wouldn't be able to process the fish.
Yeah. One thing I don't know if you realize.
One sec, we have a question.
Button. You got to press it, yeah.
I had it on, I got tired of holding it. Okay, in terms of migration, I saw your slide that shows the populations up in the rivers.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are points where they were captured along the main stem of the bay.
Mm-hmm. Let me pull up that slide real quick.
So, catfish can tolerate a higher salinity. So, it makes sense that they're in the main stem of the bay, although the recent experience is that there are less catfish in the main stem of the bay than there used to be. So, in terms of snakeheads can't really tolerate the main stem of the bay that well.
Correct.
Yet they migrate.
Yeah, I think, you're going to see smaller numbers of these fish in areas where they typically aren't, but the larger concentrations of the fish are going to be in the habitats that are more suitable for them, where the salinity's right. I think it's really all about salinity. For example, last year, we had higher salinity levels in the bay. We didn't have as much rain as we had in 2024. We didn't catch as many fish. I had to go further up the bay towards the mouth of the Patapsco to catch them. But in 2024, there were a lot of fish right at Sandy Point, so we didn't even have to go past Pedickery to catch fish. And we were catching more fish in 2024 on fewer hooks. So I think that had a lot to do with salinity. I'm only going to go so far to chase catfish, but I think it's all about the salinity as to where the large concentrations of them are going to be.
But you're getting to my question, the point is that these migrations continue to happen, but they might not happen on high salinity years, whereas a low salinity year, you might find them not only residing in the main stem, but actually moving at that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Time for one more question.
Jay, one of the things, if you're looking actually to think about process or selling the blue catfish, I was shocked when I learned, Billy Wright actually said this, a commercial waterman from down south, was chairman of the Maryland group, and the net out of a catfish, 25 to 30% only.
But you're talking about the yield from...
Yeah, the yield from
body
catfish, just
yeah.
compared to when I'm doing, cutting my fish up, like, what?
Yeah, it's a low...
3/4 of it almost is waste. So it'd be great if we can get that into cat food or some other.
Well, I think some of the bigger cutting houses are selling the carcasses, and there's other uses for, like, the skin is processed and used for collagen, has a high collagen content. So there are uses of the byproduct for the fish. But obviously the fish cutting houses and the buyers, they're going to want to pay their watermen as little as possible because it's a business and they're trying to make money. But they're going to want to sell every piece of the catfish that they can. So it's a very low yield. Striped bass is like close to 30%. Catfish is 25. So they have a really big head and a relatively small body.
Couple of closing comments. John Wright Speaker Series is getting a reboot, so stay tuned for what's coming up this spring, summer, fall. And also Jay, if you'd like to support his livelihood, has a booth set up on your left, on the back there as you're heading out. And thank you everyone for coming out, and see you next time.